I smelled bleach in the middle of the Willamette forest long before I saw the tarp. I'd followed an elk trail off a legit hiking route. Figured I'd loop back in 10 minutes. Classic Oregon mistake. Trees thickened, light dropped, GPS spun. Every direction turned into the same wet green mess. I kept telling myself it was fine, just cut across, find the main trail again, stop being a dumbass. I tried to climb a little for signal, hold my phone up like that ever helps, watch the blue dot drift and freeze, then drift again. I argued with myself out loud. No, I'm not lost, I'm just off route, and the forest swallowed my voice like it didn't care. When I hit the smell, I thought creek at first. Wet rocks, algae, that cold mineral bite. Then it punched through and burned my nose and throat. Bleach and something rotten fighting each other. It wasn't the clean, pool kind. It was sharp and angry, like someone dumped it in a hurry. I stopped walking without deciding to. My body did it for me. I stood there breathing shallow, listening for anything that didn't sound like rain. I should have turned around right then. I didn't because I'm stubborn and because the smell felt like a landmark in a maze. I pushed through Salal and stepped into a clearing someone had scrubbed. Ground raked, branches cut, no mushrooms, no brush, no ferns reaching in, just mud and snapped twigs laid down like a person cared where they fell. The place looked wrong in that specific way that makes your skin tighten, like you're the only one who missed the memo. A blue tarp was stretched tight between trees like a low roof. Not a campsite, not a hunter's shelter. Too low, too clean, too intentional. The whole thing screamed, in that quiet way, you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't be looking under this fucking tarp. Under it, 5 plastic totes with lids duct taped shut, a folding table, chains screwed into 2 stumps. Chains, fresh hardware, no rust, the screws bright like they'd been driven in that morning. The chains weren't tossed there. They were coiled and ready, ends clipped to the stumps like restraints. On the table sat a cheap hunting knife, a half-empty bottle of water, paper towels, and a little stack of black trash bags. A battery lantern sat in the middle, and when I touched it, the plastic was still warm, like a hand had just left it. My fingers came away sticky, not sap, dark, half-dried. I wiped it on my pants before I even looked at it, pure reflex, and then I hated myself for smearing it like that mattered. My brain tried to hand me normal explanations anyway. Some weird cleanup crew, poachers, dumpers. But bleach doesn't show up in the middle of nowhere by accident, and nobody screws chains into stumps for fun. There was a faint drip under the tarp, slow and steady, and it made the whole setup feel alive. I heard voices then, not close enough to see, but close enough that every hair on my arms lifted. 2 men, arguing quietly in the trees like they were trying to be respectful about something disgusting. One said, "Next time we don't wait so long." The other said, "You clean better then." They nearly found and cut off. Leaves shifted, boots on wet dirt. My heart tried to climb out of my throat. I mouthed "fuck" without sound, like the word could anchor me. I didn't think, I just moved. I slid under the tarp because I didn't know where else to go. That sounds insane now, hiding under the thing that made me want to puke, but the tarp blocked sight lines, and my brain wanted cover more than it wanted dignity. My knees sank into mud. The bleach stung my eyes. I grabbed the nearest thing, cheap hunting knife left on the table, and my hand shook so bad I almost dropped it. The handle was slick. The blade had that dull shine of something that's been used and wiped fast. I didn't open the totes. I didn't even touch them. I kept my eyes on the ground like the ground couldn't show me anything. Then I lowered myself and started crawling downhill on my stomach, using roots, dragging myself like I was trying to escape a burning house. Mud soaked through my shirt. Little sticks scraped my ribs. I breathed through my teeth because breathing through my nose felt like drinking bleach. I had to fight the urge to cough because coughing felt like yelling my name. I kept telling myself, don't think, move, because the second I pictured what was in those totes, I knew I'd freeze. They stepped into the clearing behind me while I was still in sight range. I heard one kick a tote and laugh, like it was a cooler at a tailgate. Heard the other say, "Don't spill it. Animals will drag it." Metal clinked. Something wet slapped against plastic. For a second, I was sure they'd look up and see the smear on my pants and follow it like a blood trail. And I almost bolted, but bolting uphill through brush would have sounded like a deer getting chased. So I flattened out and kept inching, slower, quieter, pressing my cheek into moss, waiting for footsteps to come down after me. They didn't sound scared. That's what broke me. They sounded annoyed, like they had chores. Like I'd walked in on someone changing oil. When the voices drifted away under the tarp again, I finally pushed up to my hands and knees and started moving faster. I didn't go back to the main trail. The trail felt like a lie at that point, like it would curve and dump me right back into that clearing. I kept cutting downhill, half running, snapping branches because I couldn't care about stealth anymore. The knife bounced against my thigh, and I hated that it was the only thing making me feel less naked. After a while, the bleach faded, and I caught something else. Exhaust, faint but real. It was the best smell I've ever hated. I followed it like a starving dog follows food. Then I punched through brush and popped out on a logging road, gravel and tire tracks, and an ugly strip of open sky. I just stood there shaking, trying to decide if I should cry or puke, because the trees behind me suddenly felt like a wall that could hide anything. A pickup rolled up and braked hard, and a guy in a hard hat leaned out and lit me up for trespassing, barking like I'd keyed his truck. He was pissed in that bored, territorial way, like I'd dented his day. I tried to talk, and nothing came out at first. My mouth had turned to dust. He saw my face then, the mud, the wide eyes, the dark smear on my hands, and his anger dropped out of him like someone cut a wire. He didn't ask what I'd been doing out there. He didn't want the answer. He just pointed down the road, sharp like he was shooing a stray, and said, "Don't tell me what you saw. I work here. I got kids." I wanted to grab him by the vest and make him look at me, make him say more, make him help, but he was already turning away, pretending he hadn't said anything, pretending this was just some hiker being stupid. I walked that road until my legs went numb because my legs didn't trust the trees anymore. Every crow call made me flinch. Every gust in the branches sounded like someone stepping around me. When I finally reached the lot and found my car, I locked the doors and sat there with the key in my fist, not turning it, just listening. Everything was normal. Too normal. Somewhere far off, I could hear other hikers laughing, and it made me want to scream at them to shut up and get off the trail. I drove with the windows down because the smell felt stuck inside my nose. I stopped twice on the shoulder just to breathe because my hands kept cramping around the wheel like I was still gripping roots. At one point, I pulled my phone out and stared at the 911 screen with my thumb hovering. Then I pictured having to explain a tarp and some totes to some dispatcher who's heard every fake story in the book, and I pictured those guys hearing sirens in the distance and deciding to go hunting for whoever stumbled into their setup. I told myself I'd go straight to a ranger station. I didn't. I went to the nearest gas station like a coward and tried to wash the whole day off in public. I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and I looked like I just crawled out of a ditch, eyes bloodshot, jaw shaking. A woman came in with her kid and froze when she saw me, and I hated that I probably looked like the problem. I scrubbed my hands at a gas station sink until my knuckles stung and the water ran pinkish gray, and I still couldn't shake that sticky feeling. I thought about calling the cops 100 times. I also thought about how I couldn't give them a pin on a map, how I'd have to admit I wandered off trail, how those men already knew how to clean a clearing and didn't sound like the kind who panics. I kept seeing the lantern warm under my fingers like proof I'd been 1 minute away from being the sixth tote. That night, the shower steam dragged the bleach smell back out of my hair, and I stood there until the water went cold, staring at the tile, jaw clenched. I kept replaying the chains screwed into the stumps, the way they were set up for bodies, not gear. I kept replaying the laugh when the tote got kicked. I don't know what they were doing, and I don't want to. I just know the forest didn't feel like trees anymore after that. It felt like cover. I never opened those totes in my head. I don't want to know what needed that much bleach. The lights on the beach moved against the tide. That's what messed with me first. I'd driven to a pullout south of Yachits after midnight because I couldn't sleep and I wanted my head to shut the fuck up. Fog everywhere, thick enough the lighthouse beam looked smeared. Nobody else parked there, no houses, no traffic, just my car cooling down and that roar below. I told myself it was a quick reset, 10 minutes, then home. I went down the path with a headlamp, then killed it once my boots hit sand. I didn't want to be the only bright thing out there. Out in the haze, 3 white points of light bobbed near the waterline. I figured they were other idiots with phones. Then they started drifting uphill, smooth like someone reeled them in. They didn't throw beams. No flash, no cone, no spill on the sand. Just 3 round glows sliding toward the dunes like they had wheels. I blinked hard like that would fix it. It didn't. I tried to pick a landmark to measure it against, but the fog stole landmarks. It was just movement that didn't belong. My body backed up before my brain caught up. I told myself, don't be dramatic. It's fog and distance. Your eyes lie. Then a voice landed behind my ear, calm as anything. You shouldn't watch this part. I spun around so fast my neck snapped. Nobody there. I snapped my headlamp on and swept it. Wide arcs, trying to catch a jacket, a face, anything. The only footprints were mine, one set clean. No second trail, no scuffs, nothing. That pissed me off in this stupid way, like reality was doing it on purpose. I shut the lamp again because it made me feel exposed. I looked back out. The lights reached a dark lump above the surf. I hadn't noticed it until they were close, like it only existed when it wanted attention. For a second, the lights flared, bright enough to punch shadows out of the fog. I saw a shape, long, face down, human-sized, and the arms were wrong, bent back like someone tried to fold them the bad way. Not driftwood, not an animal. A person, or close enough that my stomach decided it was. I felt my knees go loose and my mouth fill with spit like I was about to throw up. The flare snapped off. My eyes stung. When I could see again, there was nothing. No lump, no drag marks, no footprints leading in or out. Just smooth, wet sand like the whole thing got erased. The lights slid sideways together and winked out one by one. The last one hung there for half a beat, like it was checking if I'd move, then it died too. I stood there frozen, waiting for a normal explanation to show up and save me from my own brain. Nothing happened. No flashligra, no yelling, no scrambling. Just empty dark and that noise you can't talk over. My brain kept trying to bargain with it. You didn't see a face, you didn't see blood, you didn't touch anything, so maybe it wasn't real. My body didn't buy it. Then I ran. Not brave running, not I'm gonna help, just straight up flight. I scrambled up the path, breath ripping, headlamp bouncing off wet branches. Halfway up, I stopped and listened because part of me kept screaming, you can't leave a maybe body, you're a piece of shit. Then the other part screamed back, you're not dying over this. I stood there shaking, hating myself, and then my legs moved anyway. At the top, another car had arrived. It hadn't been there when I parked. It sat crooked, hood warm like it had been driven hard and killed. The windows were fogged from the inside, thick like someone had been breathing in there for a long time. No one in the front seats. I should have walked straight to my car and left. Instead, I leaned toward the windshield and saw my own face floating back at me, eyes too wide like I'd been caught doing something bad. The back glass was worse, totally steamed. I stared way too long, arguing with myself. Call someone. Don't call. If it's nothing, you look insane. If it's something, you're already too late. I popped my trunk without thinking and my hand closed on the tire iron. Then I shoved it back like it was going to make this worse. I lifted my hand like I was going to wipe the fog, then stopped because I didn't want to touch it, like the glass could grab back. And that's when, from inside that car, something thumped the rear door twice. Heavy, not knuckles, like a body rolling and hitting metal. The second hit made the window fog shiver. I jumped back so hard I slammed into my own bumper. My heart went insane. I held my breath and listened for a latch, a handle, a third hit, anything that meant it was getting out. Nothing. Just that dead quiet you get in parking lots at night. like even the air is waiting. My hand went to my phone, then froze. I pictured dialing 911 and trying to say it out loud. Floating lights, a person that vanished, a car with something in the back. I pictured the pause on the other end, the bored, "Okay, sir," the cop who'd show up and decide I was full of shit. I pictured giving my name and then having it stick to this forever like a stain. So I did the worst thing. I left. I got in, locked the doors, started the engine, and tore out of that pullout with my hands shaking on the wheel. I didn't look back because I couldn't handle seeing headlights behind me. I kept expecting them anyway. Every time a car appeared in my mirror, I felt my throat tighten, like I was about to get hunted for having seen too much. I drove until I hit a lit gas station and sat there with the car running, trying to slow my breathing like that would rewind anything. I went inside because standing still felt like choking. The clerk looked at me and said, "You good?" Like I looked that bad. I nodded too fast, grabbed a bottle of water I didn't drink, and got out. In the bathroom mirror, my face was blotchy, like I'd been crying, which pissed me off because I hadn't. I opened my phone notes and typed the location and the time, then deleted it because it looked insane on a screen. I didn't call anyone from there either. I told myself I'd go back in daylight. I told myself I'd report it when I had words that didn't sound like a ghost story. I told myself a lot of coward shit. On the drive home, I kept checking my backseat like someone could have slipped in while I was pumping gas. That's how fast your brain turns against you. I went home and didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I got that one bright flare and those twisted arms. I kept hearing those two thumps, like whatever was inside that car knew I'd listened. I checked my locks twice. I kept seeing fog windows when I blinked. In the morning, I drove part of the way back. Daylight, traffic around, everything looking normal. When I got close to the turnoff, my hands started sweating on the wheel. I didn't pull in. I just stared at the entrance as I passed it, like my eyes could gather evidence from moving car. I felt pathetic and furious at the same time. Next day, the local news mentioned a missing hiker whose last ping was near that pullout. They said they suspected a fall. The article had a smiling photo, the kind that makes you feel sick because it's proof they were real. People in the comments argued about slick rocks and common sense like it was a neat little lesson. I sat there reading it and felt my face go hot, like I was being accused by strangers who didn't even know I existed. I tried to eat lunch and couldn't. Maybe that's true. Maybe it was just a fall. But the beach didn't look like an accident scene. It looked wiped clean. And the part that keeps gnawing at me isn't even the lights anymore. It's that car. How it showed up silent. How it was fog from the inside with nobody visible. How something heavy moved back there like it was turning over in its sleep. And that voice in my ear, like somebody deciding what I was allowed to witness. It didn't sound angry. That's what makes it worse. It sounded practiced. I called the non-emergency line once from my kitchen, daylight, coffee in hand like that would make me brave. I got as far as hi. I was near, and I stopped because my tongue wouldn't cooperate. I hung up and stood there staring at the wall, feeling sick. I kept thinking about that missing hiker's photo and how I'd be explaining myself to someone who didn't care, someone who'd write it down like a nuisance report. I told a friend a trimmed version once, just weird lights near the shore, and he laughed and asked if I'd been drinking. I snapped at him, then felt like an asshole, then felt worse because I still didn't say the real part. That's what this does. It makes you shut up because the minute you say it out loud, you can hear how crazy it sounds. Maybe I saw fog and panic and my brain stitched a nightmare out of it. I'd love that. I'd pay money for that to be true. All I know is the ocean didn't move those lights. Something else did, and something in that car wanted me to stick around and find out. I still take 101 in daylight only. The clerk wrote my room number on my palm instead of the key sleeve. That was the first thing that felt wrong. I walked in soaked and wrecked, boots squeaking on tile, and I expected the usual board routine. Instead, he reached over the counter, clamped my wrist, flipped my hand up, and pressed the pen down hard like he wanted to bruise the skin. He didn't look at my face. He watched the ink sink into my palm, slow and careful, then nodded like he'd tagged me. When I pulled my hand back, he still stared at it, like he was memorizing the number on me, not the number on the door. Outside was a tiny motel near Florence, a winter storm chewing the highway. The vacancy sign flickered like it was dying. The parking lot sat empty except my car, and that should have been my cue to keep driving. I didn't. I've been white-knuckling that coastal stretch for hours, wipers fighting slush, headlights catching nothing but spray, and my brain was down a one-thought bed. He slid one key across the counter and didn't bother with a sleeve or a receipt. I asked if the door actually locked. He stared at me like I'd asked for his social security number, then gave this little shrug that didn't answer anything. I asked if anyone else was staying. He didn't say yes or no. He just watched me pocket the key, watch my palm, watch me turn away. Room 6 sat at the far end. The walkway light above it buzzed and popped. The door didn't shut clean. It only caught if I yanked it twice. First pull clicked, second pull seated. The knob wobbled in the frame like it had been worked on. I checked the deadbolt and it slid, but it felt gritty, like metal grinding on metal. I dragged the chair from the table and jammed it under the knob anyway. I hated that I did it, but I did it. Then I tested the door from inside, shoulder into it, just to hear the chair bite and hold. The room smelled like cheap bleach laid over old damp. The heater clanked, quit, clanked again. The curtains didn't meet, and a strip of parking lot light cut across the wall. I dropped my bag, kept my coat on, and listened. The place had that thin hum of emptiness, the kind that makes every little sound feel like someone breathing close. Somewhere down the row, a TV murmured, low voices and a laugh track. Then the volume dropped like someone was twisting a knob slow. They made my stomach twist because the lot looked dead. My phone showed 1 bar, then none. I tried to pull up the motel on maps, and it spun, useless. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I'd sleep and leave. I sat on the bed and stared at my palm. The ink looked too dark, pressed into the lines like it belonged there. I wiped it with a wet towel and it barely faded. Around midnight, someone started trying keys in my lock. One, jiggle. Another, jiggle. Not a quick mistake. Whoever was stood there and tested metal on metal like they had a ring full of options and time to enjoy it. The chair shifted and creaked, and I went still, phone in my hands, thumb hovering over 911, even though I didn't trust it would connect. I leaned toward the peephole, but the cheap plastic lens warped everything. I saw a smear of shadow, nothing more. The third key turned farther, and the knob twisted hard. The latch clicked inside the frame. The chair took the shove and complained. I heard the wood flex. I heard my own breath catch. Then it stopped. No knock, no sorry. No footsteps walking away. Just silence, like the person stayed there listening for me to move, waiting for me to panic and make a mistake. I stood frozen until my legs started to burn. It started again a few minutes later, softer this time, like they were trying to work the lock without waking anyone. One slow twist, stop, another slow twist. I couldn't take it. I barked out one sentence, loud and ugly, telling them to get the fuck away from my door. The hallway went quiet instantly. That scared me more than the keys, because it meant they heard me the whole time. 10 minutes later, I heard the clerk's voice through the vent, low and pissed. I told you, 6 is mine. The vent was above the bathroom, a cheap metal grate with dust around the screws, and the words came through it like he was talking into a pipe. A second man muttered something I couldn't catch. They argued in short, ugly bursts, like they were haggling, and the clerk kept coming back to that word mine. I heard a slap against a wall and a low laugh that died fast. I stood in the bathroom, staring at the vent like it could open and drop someone into my room. I didn't sleep. I sat on the bed with my shoes on and the lights off and watched the strip of hallway light under the door. Twice, slow footsteps stopped outside. Both times nobody tried the knob. They just stood there long enough to make my throat tighten, then moved on. Once I heard someone drag something down the walkway, a soft scrape, then a door closing far too gently. I kept thinking about the clerk's pen, the way he pressed down, and I kept picturing that number as a target. At dawn, the storm eased into cold drizzle. The sky went that dead gray that makes everything look bruised. I cracked the curtain and saw room 5's door open. No luggage, no towels, no sign anyone lived there. The bed was stripped to the mattress. A wide dark smear sat on one side, rubbed in, uneven, the kind of stain you don't get from coffee or soda. The room looked emptied, not cleaned, like somebody had pulled everything personal out fast. I stood there staring until my stomach flipped and I backed away. I packed without thinking. Bag zipped, coat on, chair kicked aside. The deadbolt slid back with a gritty scrape and my hand shook on the knob. I cracked the door, listened, then stepped out. My eyes went straight back to room 5 like a magnet. The door was shut now. Not half shut. Shut. That hit harder than the smear. Either I'd imagined it, or somebody closed it while I was moving, quiet enough that I didn't hear a thing. Both options felt bad. I walked straight to the office because I wanted out on my own terms, and I wanted someone to look me in the eye and tell me what the hell was going on. Behind the counter sat an older woman, chain-smoking, eyes flat, like she'd already fought the world before breakfast. She didn't have a night guy's stare. She looked annoyed that I existed. I said I was checking out, and someone tried to get into my room. She asked what room without looking up. I held my palm out over the counter like evidence. She stared at the number, then said the motel had been closed all week. She said there was no night guy on schedule. She said nobody should have been in any room. That set me off. I told her I paid a man at this counter. I told her he wrote on my hand like he was marking me. I told her someone tested keys in my lock, and I heard him in the walls fighting over my room. I told her to stop gaslighting me like I'd sleepwalked into a locked building. She snapped back that if the place was closed, then I was trespassing, and if I kept raising my voice, she'd call the cops and let me explain why I broke into a motel in a storm. I told her to call them. I told her I'd love to explain it, because I wasn't the one with a missing key and a stranger claiming a room like it was property. That made her jaw tighten. She sucked on her cigarette and stared at me like she was deciding how much trouble I was. I slapped my palm on the counter again and told her to check her keys. She yanked the key rack around. Hooks with numbers. Most keys hung there. The hook for 6 was empty. She stared at that empty spot like it offended her, then demanded my key. I didn't want to hand it over because it was the only solid thing I had, but she leaned in and told me, mean and quiet, that if I walked out with motel property, she'd make sure a deputy met me before I hit the highway. So I dropped on the counter. She picked it up with 2 fingers and checked the stamp. 6. Then she looked at my palm again. Her mouth tightened and she muttered that it matched. She didn't explain what it matched, but her eyes slid toward the back hallway like she expected someone to be listening. That little look told me she knew more than she wanted to say. I asked who the fuck put me in that room. She told me to leave. I asked if she wanted to walk with me to room 6 and see the chair marks, the messed up lock, my stuff. She said she wasn't stepping back there. I told her about room 5 and the smear. She cut me off and said I didn't see anything. When I said I did, she called me a liar and her voice jumped up like she wanted the whole building to hear. Then she dropped it back down and said low that if I was smart, I'd go right now and forget the number. I walked out with my bag dragging behind me, heart hammering. I didn't run. Running feels like permission for somebody to chase. I locked myself in my car, stared at the ink on my palm, then drove until I hit a town with actual people and lights. I scrubbed my hand in a gas station sink until it stung, and the 6 still sat there in the lines like it belonged. To the man who thought room 6 was his, fuck you, and let's never meet.